So I said that I was going to make a video on my experience with anxiety. So just to set the record straight, like there is a few different types of it. Like there's healthy anxiety where like you worry about failing the leaving cert or worry about like not making it to the airport on time and missing your flight. Like that's general anxiety. Like that's something we all have. And then there's like an unhealthy anxiety where like you think, what if I miss the flight to the airport, or what if I go to the airport and if I get my passport and then all my friends can't go on holiday because I forgot my passport and they're not going to leave me there. Like now I've ruined everyone's holiday and no one's going to forget about that and they're going to keep bringing it up constantly and it's going to be the end of the world and everyone's going to die. Like that's the type of bad anxiety like that I would have. And when I first had like my bad experience with it, I was in tour class. I was only 9, and I got like these really bad cramps in my stomach, so I had to go to the toilet. And I never got them cramps before, so I was worried that something was wrong with me. And like by nature, I am an overthinker, and when you're an overthinker and you have anxiety, like the two don't mix well, or it's a recipe for disaster. So what I had to do then was I went there to the teacher and I was like, teacher, I don't feel well. And you know, when you're that age, you're really embarrassed like to say it to your friends because like kids are just cruel and they'll strike out whatever else. So that was like kind of making me more anxious that they'd find out. And she was like, oh, you'll be okay. And like she probably thought it was fake. And I was like, no, like I really don't feel well. So I ended up being able to go home. But then what happened was the overthinking kicked in and the anxiety kicked in, which I didn't know at the time that I had. Oh, what happens if this occurs again? Like, what happens if you need to go home again? The teacher's like, oh, for fuck's sake, and you went home yesterday. Like, you can't have the same cramps in 2 days. Like, so that was the overthinking kicking in, and that's when the anxiety actually started. And I would start missing school because I was afraid that that would happen to me again. And I would make a scene, and it would be the end of the world, etc., etc. And I didn't know what was happening to me at that time. Like, I thought I was mentally ill. I thought I was going mad. Like I was just imagining all these really horrible scenarios, and at this stage like it was my first experience, so I didn't know how to deal with it. I just thought like someone had taken over my mind and this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my life, and that made me more anxious. So I would just go into school every day and I would just feel like shit, and I would be so nervous and I would be tense and I'd be sweating thinking that this was going to happen to me again, but I just had to deal with it. And I did miss a lot of school and I made up excuses not to go in because I was afraid I would feel like that again. And my parents thought I was getting bullied and I wasn't, and I would be so anxious that I would be forcing like these cramps on myself, because when you get nervous like you do get stomach cramps. um and I would just be so anxious and I would be missing loads of school, and eventually I would just have to go into school and I would just have to deal with it, as horrible as it was. And I wasn't getting any better because I wasn't trained how to deal with it. Because I couldn't talk to anyone. There's no such thing as YouTube or like, you know, Facebook to look up videos on how to deal with this. I couldn't talk to anyone. I didn't know anyone else that was going through it. There was no such thing as mental health awareness when I was 9. That was back in 2002. So I was in a really horrible situation. Um, and I was lucky in the sense that my dad went through it when he was younger, and that was one person that I could talk to, and I do have him to thank for a lot of the reason how I beat it in the end. So it was really at its peak then when I went into first year. Like I was mixed with a load of people that I didn't know. Like obviously some of my own friends were still in my class, but because there was new people in my class, it made me even more self conscious that what if I have an anxiety attack, and they're like, who the fuck is that weirdo? Like, so it did get worse at that stage, and I wasn't eating either because when you're really anxious, you lose you lose your appetite. So I would literally be starving in school because if I even seen the sight of food, I'd run out of class because I'd feel sick, even though I never actually got sick. And then that would make me anxious because I'm like, what happens if I make a scene and I have to run out of class and stuff? It was really horrible situation. Um, and I started missing school again. I had to, like I went to the doctors obviously in primary school at this stage, and he said you have anxiety, and I'm like, what's anxiety? Like I thought I had a mental illness, and they're like, you're taking panic attacks and stuff. Like what panic attacks? What's wrong with me? Like am I mental? Like am I psychologically ill? It was horrible. Everything was going through my mind. I didn't want to be that person in the class who, yeah, there's something wrong with her. Like she's not all there. Everything was going through my mind. I even remember at one stage, I I was in the doctor's surgery and I was having a massive panic attack because again I didn't know what was happening to me. I thought I was just a prisoner in my own mind. And there was a woman across from me and she was like, too mad, does she want to go in before me? Like she doesn't look well at all. Like, she's fucking having a breakdown there. And the doctor was testing me for appendicitis and everything like that, and eventually just turned around and he's like, yeah, look, I think I have anxiety. And I was like, oh my god, this is huge, I'm gonna have this for the rest of my life. Like, thinking that it was something that I'd have to live with for the rest of my life. And in the end, you do come out the other side, and you can beat it. But yeah, I was in secondary school, and you know, this is where it was at its peak in fourth year. I was going to see a guidance counsellor in my school, and I was going to see a counsellor outside school in James's Hospital. So, and they were both telling me, like, do this, do X, Y, and Z, and you'll beat it. And I was so stubborn at that stage. I was like, I'm not going to beat this. Like, I'm going to have this for the rest of my life. Like, what do you mean just go and face me fears and face the situation? Like, you don't realise how bad this is. This is horrible. Like, you don't understand. And, you know, looking back now, like, they were right. Because my dad said the exact same thing. The worst thing you can do is avoid the situation that makes you anxious. And it's so true. The more you avoid that situation, the stronger the anxiety gets. So what I had to do eventually was, after missing a lot of days in fourth year, you know, even to the point where, like, my window is facing out onto my road and I can see the kids going back and forth to school on their lunch break, and I was looking out and I was like, why can't I just be normal? Like, why can't I just be a normal kid who can just get up and go to school, doesn't have to worry about like stupid irrational things, because that's what anxiety is. You worry about silly things that don't even end up happening. And it was just, at the time I thought I was never going to be it, and it was just, I felt like a prisoner in my own mind. I felt like I was being bullied by my own mind, like, you know. And again, my stomach would be like in knots. I'd just be constantly heaving all the time, like, because I was so anxious. I'd be getting sick, but nothing would actually come up. Like, I was actually getting pains in my throat because it was like so anxious, like, and retching. It was, oh, it was horrible. And my dad just kept saying, you need to go into school and you need to just sit there for 8 fucking hours and realise that you can actually do it. Because one of the things is, you live in the future a lot when you have anxiety. And I would wake up every day and I'd be like, I have to sit in this classroom for 8 hours feeling like this. I can't do it. I can't do this. That's the type of attitude you have. Like, people would look forward to the midterm breaks and stuff, and I would, but completely for the wrong reasons. Like, I would be delighted the Friday that we get off for the midterm, and then Saturday comes around the next day and I'm like, okay, only 6 days and I had to go back to school and feel like a bag of nerves again. Only 5 days, only 4 days, only 3 days. Couldn't enjoy my midterm because I'd be so anxious about going back to school and feeling like that. That's how much I lived in the future. And Sunday night would come then, the day before school starts, and I would try and stay awake as long as possible, because it meant that if I went to sleep, time flies like that, and I would have to wake up and go to school. So I would try and stay awake as long as possible to prolong waking up. That's how bad it got. I mean, it got to a stage as well where my anxiety was so bad. I was agoraphobic, where I couldn't leave the house because I viewed my house as a safe house. So whatever else happened to me, nothing could happen to me at home. I was safe at home. You know, my mum and dad was there. I had my room. I could just roll up in a blanket and just feel shit. So when I left the house, I felt unsafe and I felt like anything could happen. I felt like I couldn't get home fast enough if I felt anxious. I couldn't even go out to town. Like, I couldn't even go to shop in pennies because I would get anxiety attacks. And it was just horrible. I couldn't do anything, and I couldn't tell my friends because they didn't understand. Like, they'd look at me like I had 10 heads. They'd be like, what? Like, you're afraid that's gonna happen to you? You know, like, what the fuck, hop on, like, that's not gonna happen to you. And it's easy for someone who's not going through anxiety to say, you'd be grand, everything's gonna be grand, when in your head it's not. It's fucking horrible. Like, so I'll get to the stage now where I actually had to just, you know, grow up here and fucking face it. So yeah, number one is, I was absolutely terrified, felt like shit, sweating to bits, muscles tense as fuck sitting in the classroom. But I said, you know what, I'm just gonna have to do this and I'm gonna hate it. But each day I sit there, I'm gonna get that bit stronger. Then I did it for the second day and the third day and the fourth day. And as the days went on, I did get that bit stronger, because I was proving to myself, you're stronger than you think. You can actually do this, when you've been brainwashing yourself all along that you can't. So whatever situation you're afraid of, don't avoid it, because it will get worse. Whatever situation you're afraid of, face it, because you will get better. And then the second one is, imagine the worst thing does happen, like the scenario that you're imagining in your mind. Imagine the worst scenario does happen. What's the worst that can happen? Are you going to die? Nobody's ever died from an anxiety attack. I've never had to call an ambulance. I'll hold my hands up and say that. I've never got to the stage where it's been that bad. But nobody has ever died from a panic attack, okay? And then again, imagine the scenario, and then imagine the steps that you would take if the worst does happen. Okay, so if this does happen, what will I do? What will I do to deal with it? And then you actually start thinking logically, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, if it does happen, I'll just do this and everything will be grand, and what am I even worried about? So what if this happens? Like, life goes on. And you're so conscious about things happening to you in public that you have to remember people are so caught up in their own shit and their own problems that they don't actually think about you a lot as a person. They don't think about what you're going through a lot because they're so focused on their own issues. I mean, I used to be so worried about things happening to me in public that when something did happen, people are actually genuinely very caring, and they're like, yeah, okay, do you want to drink a water? Do you want us to call someone? You know, so that would be the second step. And that's just the ice cream man outside. And then the third step is you just have to think positively. You do have to think that, try avoid thinking that I'm going to have this for the rest of my life, because you're not. You can't live in the future. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. 99% of the things you worry about never even happen. It's the 1% that comes out and hits you in the face. I've noticed that a lot through experience, and you're not going to beat it overnight. And it is going to take a lot of repetition of that. Like, so what if this happens? You know, fuck it, what's the worst that can happen? You know, you can't. Someone who's only going through anxiety, they don't just say that to themselves once and then bang, you're cured. It takes a lot of repetition and a lot of experience and a lot of like discipline, and you do realize in the end that you are stronger than you think. So for anybody that is going through anxiety, like, please try and remember that it's not something that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. And like I said, you just have to give yourself the tough love, and it's going to be really difficult at the start, but with lots of repetition, like, you will come out the other end stronger. Again, you don't realize how strong you are till being strong is your only option. And you have to do a lot of comparison. Like, if I can do this once, I can do it again. Why can't I? So you do talk to yourself a lot. Like, I'm not gonna lie, you do have a lot of mental pep talks with yourself. But honestly, like, if I had never done that, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I wouldn't be able to stand on stage in front of thousands of people and make people laugh. Like, that would be my worst nightmare at one stage. Not public speaking, but like being in a public setting and feeling comfortable, you know. So look, I'm a shining example that I thought I was going to end it all at one stage when I was like 13, and now I realise that you are stronger than you think, and it's not the end of the world, and you have to try and live in the now and stop thinking about tomorrow, because the amount of times I've worried about shit that hasn't even happened, and you just like, I've wasted like weeks worrying about this situation that I'm in now, and I actually ended up being okay. So, you know, your mind is your worst enemy, but you just have to bully your mind back and be like, I'm the one in charge here, so yeah, fuck off. So that's the advice I would give anybody going through it. I hope I've helped. Sorry if it's a bit all over the place, but I was never good at English in school and couldn't put an essay together to save me life. So yeah, I hope I helped anyone who's going through anxiety. And I did get a lot of messages off people, and it's shocking to see how many people are actually going through it right now. And again, just listen to me when I say it's not something that you have to spend the rest of your life with. And I'm flattered at the support as well, and people who have family members going through it and don't know what to do. Like, you just, like, the key piece of information I would give to anyone, like, just to end this video in conclusion, is that, again, whatever situation you're afraid of, don't avoid it. Like, just keep doing it, as afraid as you are. Like, just keep doing it, and you'll see, like, that it's not as bad as your mind is making it out to be, and you're stronger than you think. So yeah, thanks.